Clara Mae Boone was a 36-year-old veteran who believed the hardest battles of her life were already behind her. But on one frozen night in the Helena National Forest, her German Shepherd scout began clawing furiously at the ground until Clara uncovered a nightmare she never could have imagined. Buried alive, bound in ropes, left struggling for breath beneath the frozen earth, lay Detective Jack Holloway. With his last strength, he whispered a truth that shattered Clara's world. Her husband, Eli Boone, hadn't died in an accident. He had been murdered. What followed would break her heart, and yet carry the power to mend it at the same time. Winter in Helena, Montana, had a way of swallowing every sound. The city lay in a valley wrapped by the northern Rockies, its lights dim against snow-capped peaks. Outside the town, where the Helena National Forest stretched endlessly, silence ruled, broken only by the crunch of boots on ice and the whisper of wind through frozen pines. Clara inhaled deeply, her breath blooming into pale clouds that vanished in the cold air. She tugged her parka tighter, the olive fabric worn by years of use. At 36, she carried herself with the quiet discipline of a woman who had lived two lives, one as a staff sergeant in Iraq beneath burning suns, the other as a widow in Montana beneath the weight of loss. 3 years had passed since Eli, her anchor, had died in what officials had called an accident. Yet the ache never eased. She had chosen solitude over sympathy, living each day with only Scout, her 5-year-old shepherd. He trotted faithfully at her side, sable coat catching the dim light, amber eyes sharp and searching. He was her shadow, her sentinel, the one being who demanded her presence in this world. That night the forest seemed unnaturally still. Above the last blush of sunset faded to bruised purple stars beginning to pierce the sky. Clara adjusted her rucksack, listening to the creak of leather straps and the crunch of snow beneath her boots. Suddenly Scout halted. His ears shot up, tail rigid body locked, a low growl vibrating in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Clara's hand moved instinctively to the knife strapped to her thigh. Scout stepped forward, nose pressed to the ground. His body trembled with the alertness of a soldier sensing danger. He pawed at a patch of earth at the base of a pine. Clara frowned. The snow there looked wrong, uneven, as if it had been shoved back in haste. Scout dug harder claws, tearing through frozen crust dirt and ice, flying behind him. His growl turned into frantic barks. Clara dropped to her knees, brushing snow aside. At first it was only soil. Then something pale surfaced. Her stomach lurched. A human hand. The skin was raw, wrists bruised and cut by thick rope. "Oh God," she muttered. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, battle instincts flooding back. She clawed faster gloves, slick with melting frost. Scout whined sharply, digging beside her, their movements desperate and in sync. The dirt gave way to a face male mud smeared across his cheeks, lips blue from cold. His eyelids twitched under clumps of soil, chest barely rising beneath the weight of the earth. Clara scraped mud from his mouth, gasping when he groaned faintly. His body was twisted, shoved into the shallow grave, bound at ankles and wrists with the same rough rope. His shirt, once crisp, was torn skin beneath, marbled with bruises. His heavy black coat was ripped at the seams. A badge glimmered faintly from his belt, dulled by soil, yet visible under Clara's flashlight. Detective Jack Holloway. Everyone in Helena knew the name. This wasn't New York or Los Angeles. Here names traveled fast. Officers were neighbors, coaches, churchgoers. Jack was 40, a veteran detective with a reputation for digging where others wouldn't. Now he lay bound beneath her, his breath rattling like shattered glass. Clara's throat tightened. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A faint pulse, fragile, but there. Relief surged through her chest. Jack's lips parted, a hoarse whisper escaping, too weak to form words, dirt clinging to his teeth. His head tilted slightly toward her eyes, fluttering half open. Clara leaned closer, straining to catch his voice, but the wind gusted, rattling branches overhead, swallowing the sound. Scout barked again, spinning toward the tree line, as if aware of unseen eyes. The forest was too quiet, holding its secrets in clenched fists. Clara Mae Boone stared at the man half buried in the snow, icy flakes stinging her cheeks. A detective dumped in the wilderness and left to die. Who had put him here? Why this spot? Deep in her gut, she knew this discovery was only the beginning of something far darker. Her breath trembled in the cold. She longed to drag him free, to cut the ropes, to force life back into his broken body. But for a moment all she could do was kneel there, staring at the horror Scout had unearthed. Jack Holloway's chest rose shallowly, his eyes slipping closed, as if every breath might be his last. Clara's hands clenched into fists. Whatever nightmare she had stumbled into, it was only beginning. The snow kept falling silent, merciless, covering the man as though the earth itself wanted him hidden. Scout growled low and steady beside her, a guardian daring the shadows to creep closer, and Clara Mae Boone realized she was staring at a grave that was never meant to be found. The storm drifted down from the canopy above, silent and relentless, dusting Clara's hair and settling across Scout's fur. For a long moment she knelt over the battered detective, pulse racing with the disbelief that he still clung to life. His lips were bluish, his chest straining weakly against the ropes and soil. Hesitation would kill him faster than the cold. Clara ripped her knife free. The blade glinted in the narrow beam of her flashlight as she worked furiously at the cords binding his wrists. The ropes were rough hemp, stiff with frost, biting deep into raw flesh. She saw where they had carved bloody grooves into his skin. With every cut, Jack's body twitched weakly, as though even the loosening bonds sent ripples of pain through him. Scout pressed close ears flat, his growl constant. His gaze swept the tree-line nostrils flaring. Clara trusted that look. Scout was more than a companion. He was her warning bell, tuned to every tremor in the night. Finally, the last cord snapped. She pulled Jack's arms free, then bent to slice through the knots binding his ankles. When she cleared the last of the soil from his chest, Jack coughed violently, dirt flying from his mouth. The sound was raw and jagged, echoing through the frozen forest like a plea. Clara eased his head onto her lap, stripping off her gloves so she could feel his skin directly. Ice cold, his pulse beneath her jawline erratic. "Stay with me," she ordered, her voice sharp and commanding, the same tone she'd once used with soldiers in battle. "You're not done here. Not tonight." His eyelids fluttered. He was a man in his early 40s, a face carved by years of fatigue and duty. Dark hair streaked with gray clung sakong damp to his forehead. His coat, standard issue from the Helena Police Department, was torn at the shoulder lining, ripped, as if he had been dragged across the ground. Clara's mind catalogued details automatically, her soldier's training, a live condition of the victim, signs of struggle, possible attackers. Jack's lips moved, but nothing came. Clara leaned closer, straining. "Ambush," he rasped at last, his throat raw. They came out of nowhere. Masks. All of them. He coughed, hard voice scraping like gravel. "I thought I was close to closing it. I was wrong." His hand twitched weakly, clutching her sleeve. Clara steadied him, confusion warring with fear. Who did this? Why bury you here? His eyes rolled, then locked on hers with startling clarity. His words cut like broken glass. Your husband, Eli Boone. It wasn't an accident. The world tilted, snow blurring around her. Her breath caught in her throat. For 3 years, she had lived under the official story that Eli's brakes failed on an icy road, sending him into a ravine. She had replayed it endlessly, convincing herself it was fate, a cruel twist of chance. Now, a man half dead and buried alive was telling her it had been murder. Her throat tightened. What did you say? Jack coughed again, a fleck of blood staining the snow, but his grip on her arm held firm. They killed him, the same ones who tried to bury me. His voice cracked as his head slumped against her arm, eyelids heavy. Clara's eyes stung. Tears slid down her cheeks, mixing with snow that melted on her skin. Rage and grief collided inside her chest, a storm fiercer than the one falling around them. She pressed her forehead briefly against the detective's temple, whispering, "No. No. Not Eli." Scout whined low beside her, nudging her shoulder, as if he sensed her unraveling, his body pressed close to shield her from the shadows. The growl in Scout's throat deepened, warning of the darkness pressing in around them, but he also leaned closer to her in an almost human gesture of comfort. Clara Mae Boone forced herself upright, dragging air into her lungs. She had seen death before, carried men home under fire, but this was different. This was personal. A wound she thought had scarred over had ripped open all over again. She wiped her face with the back of her glove and looked down at Jack Holloway. In a few broken whispers, he had given her more truth than 3 years of silence ever had. But now he was fading consciousness, slipping like water through her fingers. She shook him gently. Stay awake. Tell me who they are. Who killed Eli? His eyes fluttered, breath rattling. Names. In my notes. Not safe here. His words fell apart, his body sagging heavier against her. Clara clenched her jaw, staring out into the blackness beyond the flashlight's beam. Somewhere out there lurked the men who thought they'd silenced Jack, the same ones who had stolen Eli Boone from her. Somewhere out there danger waited, maybe even watching them now. She steadied Jack against her knees. His breathing was shallow, but it was still there. Scout stood guard, body taut, fur bristling, amber eyes locked on the unseen. The truth had cracked open like ice beneath Clara's boots, and the abyss underneath was darker than she could have ever feared. For now she had only one mission: keep Jack alive, cling to his revelation, and face the night with the soldier's resolve she thought had died with Eli. The forest pressed in snow, falling heavier, and Clara Mae Boone knew her world had changed forever. The drive back to Hauser Lake blurred into snow and shadows. Clara's pickup rattled down the narrow road tires, crunching through drifts, headlights barely cutting the dark. In the back seat, Jack slumped against the window, wrapped in Clara's spare field blanket, his breathing shallow but steadier. Scout pressed close to him, head lifted, ears sharp, daring the night to make another move. Clara gripped the wheel, eyes locked on the winding road ahead. Hauser Lake was only 20 minutes from Helena, but tonight it felt like another world, remote, cold, unforgiving. Her cabin stood on the northern shore, a modest timber structure with a wood stove and creaking porch built more for solitude than company. It had been her refuge since Eli's death, a place to bury memories she couldn't silence. By the time she pulled into the clearing, snow had thickened, muffling the tires and blanketing the roof in white. She cut the engine, opened the door, and Montana's silence swallowed her whole. Jack stirred as she opened the rear door. Up close, his face looked harsher under the dome light lines at his eyes, carved deeper by pain, lips cracked, dirt crusted in the corners. She half carried him into the cabin, Scout pacing restlessly at their side. Inside, the warmth of the stove wrapped around them, though the fire had burned low. Clara eased Jack onto the worn leather couch and coaxed the embers back to life. Flickering flames painted the room amber. Shelves of old military manuals, Eli's framed photographs of mountain trails, a folded flag in glass. The sight twisted Clara's chest until she forced herself to look away. She crouched beside Jack, peeling away mud-stiffened layers. His shirt was torn across the ribs, and when she touched gently, he flinched. Bruises darkened his torso. Some fresh, others older, layered like a record of too many battles fought in silence. She cleaned his cuts with antiseptic, wrapped his wrists where the rope had bitten deep. Jack's eyes cracked open, flames reflecting in them. His voice was rough, low. "You didn't have to bring me here." Clara met his gaze firmly. "If I'd left you in the woods, you'd be dead." That was never an option. He tried a faint smile, then coughed. When the fit passed, his voice steadied. "I suppose you deserve the truth. More than anyone." Clara froze, cloth stilling in her hands. She braced herself. Jack shifted, pulling the blanket tighter across his chest. 3 years ago, Eli wasn't just unlucky on an icy road. He was targeted. He came to me with files, bank ledgers, wire transfers, proof that a company called Frontier Energy was laundering money through shell operations. He thought exposing it could clean up this city. Clara's heart faltered. Eli's name felt like both a blade and a bomb when spoken aloud. Jack's eyes held hers. Frontier Energy is run by Silas Kane. 60s billionaire philanthropist on paper, a monster underneath. He built an empire out of energy contracts, but behind those glass towers are bribes, fraud, worse. Eli stumbled onto it by accident. He'd uncovered a ledger while helping a client at his old firm. He handed it to me. Clara Mae Boone's throat tightened. Eli Boone had been an accountant, precise, meticulous. She could still see him bent over his laptop at their kitchen table, brow furrowed at rows of numbers unwilling to ignore when they didn't add up. Jack Holloway looked away, jaw tightening. A week after he gave me the files, he was gone. His car went off Route 12. They called it bad brakes. Jack's voice hardened. I never believed it. By then, the files were gone. Someone inside buried it. The words landed heavy in the small cabin. Clara's hands clenched the rag until her knuckles whitened. For years, she had lived with gnawing suspicion, swallowing it without proof. Now, Jack confirmed every fear she had locked away. Her eyes burned. "And you?" she asked. I kept digging, Jack admitted. Quietly. Too quietly. But Silas Kane has eyes everywhere. When I got close again, they came. Masks, gloves, the whole setup. They beat me, tied me up, and meant to make sure I'd never open my mouth again. He swallowed, a shadow darkening his face. They figured no one would find me. Clara sat back on her heels, staring into the flickering fire. The scar inside her had torn open again, but beneath the pain burned something sharper, rage cold as steel. She had buried Eli twice, once in the earth, and once in silence. That ended tonight. Scout growled softly, padding to the front window. His body stiffened, ears pricked. Clara followed his gaze. Through the frost-glazed glass, she glimpsed a shadow moving in the tree line, too fluid to be the wind. Her stomach tightened. Jack noticed her stillness. "What is it?" She crossed to the window with deliberate steps. Scout pressed his nose to the pane tail, rigid. Outside, the snow thickened, but for an instant she swore she saw a figure watching from the darkness. Then, it was gone. Clara dropped the curtain, jaw set. "We're not alone." Jack grimaced on the couch. "They'll finish what they started." Clara turned to him, her voice cold with resolve. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Scout barked once sharp, as if sealing the vow. The cabin fell into tense silence, broken only by the crackle of the stove and the howl of the storm. The scar had never healed, and now it bled again. But Clara Mae Boone no longer feared its pain. She embraced it, because inside it lived the truth and the fight she had been waiting for. The cabin walls groaned under the weight of the storm, but Clara knew the sound outside wasn't just wind. Scout's growl deepened, his body rigid at the window, amber eyes locked on the dark beyond. Clara snuffed the lantern with a swift motion, plunging the room into shadows, lit only by the stove's dying glow. Her pulse hammered. She recognized the silence before an ambush, the breath before the strike. Sliding her knife back into its sheath, she reached beneath the couch for a long black case. With a snap, it opened, revealing a hunting rifle. Not military issue, but sturdy, reliable. She hadn't touched it in months, not since lonely hunting trips that kept her sane, but her hand still knew the weight, the balance, the ritual. She chambered around softly, then turned to Jack. The detective stirred under the blanket, his face pale but alert. His lips moved weakly. "They're here. To finish it." Clara crouched beside him. "Can you move?" Jack shook his head faintly. Voice breaking but urgent. "I'll slow you down." She set her jaw. "We're not leaving you behind." Scout erupted with a sudden bark, explosive, spinning toward the door. The handle rattled. A shadow crossed the frosted window pane. Then came the crack of splintering wood as the front door shuddered under a heavy kick. Clara sprang to her feet, rifle raised. Rifle. Movement flashed. Men in dark winter jackets. Hoods pulled tight, faces hidden behind balaclavas. Their shapes loomed in the snow, weapons glinting under the moonlight. The door burst inward. The first intruder stumbled through, met instantly by 80 pounds of fury. Scout lunged, teeth tearing into the man's arm. The attacker screamed, his weapon clattering across the wooden floor. The sudden chaos ripped the night apart. Clara Mae Boone fired once through the doorway. The blast cracked like thunder, and a shadow collapsed into the snow. She hauled Jack Holloway up, slinging his arm over her shoulder. Move now. The back door led to the trees. She half-dragged, half-carried him through the narrow kitchen and shoved the door open into a storm of swirling snow. Scout tore free from his victim and bolted after them, muzzle streaked with blood, eyes blazing like fire. The forest swallowed them, whole branches heavy with snow bending low overhead. Clara pushed forward, boots breaking deep drifts, Jack's weight dragging against her side. She moved with the precision of a soldier, on patrol, head-low steps, measured ears tuned to every shift in the night. Behind them, shouts rose from the cabin flashlight beams, slicing through the storm. Jack groaned through clenched teeth. "You should have left me." Clara cut him off in a whisper. "I don't abandon people. Not ever." They pressed deeper into the trees, the cold biting their breaths, clouds of desperation. Scout ranged ahead, nose carving through the wind, then circled back, guiding them toward heavier cover. A shot cracked from behind. Bark splintered inches from Clara's head. She ducked hard, forcing Jack down into the snow. Scout snarled, lunging toward the sound, but Clara hissed, "Stay!" He froze, trembling with fury, but obeyed. Clara scanned the dark. 3 men advanced between the trees, rifles in hand. Their leader moved with calm precision, broad-shouldered, his parka stretched over body armor. A black mask hid his face, but his posture screamed training. He raised a hand, signaling his men to flank. Clara recognized the tactic instantly. Whoever Silas Kane had sent these weren't amateurs. She pressed Jack against a fallen log. "Stay down. Don't make a sound." Then she slipped sideways into the trees, rifle steady, heart iron. The soldier inside her surged to life, grief sharpening into resolve. She circled low, stalking one of the flankers. The snow muffled her approach. When he passed within yards, she rose and swung the butt of her rifle into the base of his skull. He crumpled into the snow without a sound. She ripped his weapon free, slinging it over her back. Another intruder's flashlight swept dangerously close. Clara flattened behind a tree. Breath shallow. Scout crouched beside Jack Amber, eyes locked on her, waiting for her signal. She exhaled, raised her rifle, and fired. The second man dropped into the drifts, his light snuffed out. Shouts erupted. The leader barked orders, voice muffled but commanding. Clara slipped back through the trees, her body remembering every ambush she had ever survived. Jack pushed himself up slightly, eyes wide. He saw not just a widow, but a soldier, cold, deliberate, unbreakable. Clara returned, pulling his arm once more across her shoulders. "We need distance. Now." Scout darted ahead, then froze, ears pricked. A faint path curled toward a ravine she knew well. It would drag them deeper, harder to follow. She trusted the dog's instincts more than her memory. The leader cursed in the darkness, his team faltering. Clara never looked back. She drove forward every step, fueled by rage and survival, dragging Jack through the snow, Scout carving a path like the soldier's scout he was named for. The storm thickened, curtain-like, cloaking them in white. Flashlights flickered far behind, shouts fading. For the moment, they'd slipped the noose. They collapsed in a hollow beneath clustered pines, snow forming a natural shelter. Clara lowered Jack against a trunk, his face, pale body trembling. She crouched close, eyes scanning the trees. Scout pressed to her side, his growl, steady body taut with loyalty. The night held its breath once more. The cabin was gone, enemies behind them, wilderness ahead. Clara's chest heaved, but her eyes burned with fire. She had defended Eli Boone's memory in silence for years. Tonight, silence was gone. The hollow beneath the pines was only temporary. Staying meant death. Moving meant risk. The choice wasn't hers, it was Scout's. The shepherd paced in tight circles, ears swiveling at every faint crack, then pressed his nose hard against Clara's arm, urging her forward. She looked down at Jack Holloway, his lips pale, face gaunt, but his eyes still carried a stubborn flame. "We can't stay here," Clara Mae Boone murmured. "There's only one place left to go." By dawn, they reached the outskirts of Helena, slipping along back roads before merging onto I-15 South. Clara's pickup rattled over the icy asphalt, its old heater groaning as it tried to keep the windshield clear. Jack Holloway slouched in the passenger seat, bundled in blankets, each bump forcing a wince across his face. Scout sat upright between them, eyes locked on the horizon, as if he understood the gravity of their flight. Billings lay 200 miles east, a city bigger than Helena, but still small enough that strangers stood out. More importantly, it was home to someone Clara had never met but trusted on instinct. Mariah Thorne of the FBI, 42 second-generation Mexican-American raised in El Paso by a schoolteacher mother and a father who had worn the Border Patrol badge. She had climbed the Bureau's ranks with stubborn grit, gaining a reputation for chasing corruption cases others pretended not to see. Clara had never crossed her path, But Jack once told her that Mariah was the only Fed who hadn't been bought by Silas Kane's money. The drive stretched long and tense. The radio left cold and silent, the landscape rolling by in endless plains dusted with snow. Jack drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, his breathing shallow. When he stirred, his voice was worn thin by pain. "I should have gone to Mariah sooner," he muttered. "Thought I could handle it myself. Keep it small. Maybe Kane wouldn't notice. Stupid." Clara kept her eyes on the road. "You're alive. That's already more than they planned. Don't waste what's left beating yourself up." He gave a faint chuckle, then fell quiet. For miles only the hum of the tires filled the cab. Then Jack turned his head, studying her profile. "You're stronger than I expected." She didn't look at him. "Grief will either break you or forge you. I didn't get to choose which." His gaze softened. He hesitated, then spoke again. "There was someone before it all spiraled. A woman. Lydia Rose, doctor at St. Vincent's in Billings. Brilliant, kind, the kind of person who makes you believe you could live outside the job." His fingers clenched the blanket. "But once I started digging into Kane, I cut it off. Better she hate me than end up in the ground." Clara finally glanced at him. His confession carried raw regret, heavier than his injuries. "You pushed her away to protect her." Jack's smile was bitter. "That's what I told myself. Still don't know if it was courage or cowardice." Clara's chest tightened. In his story, she heard her own echo. Eli hadn't pushed her away fate, or Kane's hand had ripped him from her. Driving through Montana's desolate winter, she realized she and Jack were bound by scars of different shapes, but equal weight. By late afternoon, the skyline of Billings broke the horizon modest towers against snowy plains. Clara pulled into a side street near the Federal Building, parking in the shadow of a stone church. She cut the engine. "This is it," Jack whispered. They slipped inside through a service entrance, Scout padding silently at their heels. The Federal Building smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. At the far end of a narrow hall, a woman in a navy pantsuit stepped from an office file tucked beneath her arm. Mariah Thorne carried authority without saying a word. Tall, with black hair streaked silver, pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. Her dark eyes scanned them instantly, sharp, but not without kindness. She wore a wool coat over her suit boots built for winter streets. Years in the bureau had etched calm authority into her face, but there was still something steady human, the echo of the teacher mother who raised her. Jack managed a weak smile. "Mariah, I bet you thought I was dead." Her brows lifted as she strode forward, taking in his battered state. "You look like hell, Holloway." Then her gaze shifted to Clara, assessing measuring. "And you brought a soldier with you. Smart." Clara straightened instinctively. "Clara Mae Boone, Army veteran, widow." She hesitated on the last word, but Mariah only nodded as if she already knew. Mariah ushered them quickly into her office, snapping the blinds shut. Neat stacks of files covered her desk, evidence of battles fought with paper trails instead of rifles. But the Glock holstered discreetly beneath her blazer told Clara this woman wasn't naive about what her enemies could do. Jack Holloway sagged into the chair, his voice a rasp. "It's Silas Kane. He tried to bury me, literally." Clara Mae Boone stood stiffly beside him. "I pulled him out." Mariah Thorne's jaw tightened at the name. "Kane," she said, almost spitting it. "I've been circling him for years. Frontier Energy's books reek, but every time we close in, someone higher up pulls the plug. Bribes, threats, it's like chasing smoke." Clara folded her arms. "Then we need fire. Proof they can't ignore." Mariah studied her eyes, narrowing slightly. You've lost someone to him too. Clara nodded once. My husband, Eli Boone, 3 years ago. Car crash. They called it an accident. Jack says otherwise. For the first time, Mariah's expression faltered. She lowered herself into her chair, setting the file aside. Then you understand what's at stake. The three of them sat in taut silence, the storm outside, rattling the windows. Scout lay at Clara's feet, head on his paws, but eyes locked on the door, as if he knew safety here was an illusion. Mariah leaned forward, her voice low. I can't promise you justice overnight. Kane has men everywhere, even inside law enforcement. But if you've made it this far alive, maybe together, we can finally cut through the smoke. Clara felt Jack's eyes on her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone in her fight. Mariah turned the lock on her office door and yanked the blinds tight until the gray light of Billings narrowed into slats. Beyond the walls, the federal building hummed phones, ringing footsteps echoing, but inside the air thickened with secrecy. She moved to a tall steel cabinet, pulled a key ring from her belt, and opened a drawer with a metallic snap. Clara stood near the desk, arms crossed, still stiff from the long drive. Jack sat hunched, fatigue carved deep into his face. Scout rested at Clara's boots, ears flicking at every sound, his body taut but calm, the steady presence that had anchored her through every storm. Mariah laid a thick folder on the desk, its red confidential stamp catching the light. Her expression was carved from stone. This isn't supposed to exist outside bureau walls, she said quietly. But if you're going to fight Kane, you need to see what we've got, and you need to understand just how dangerous he is. She flipped the folder open. Inside lay photographs, grainy surveillance shots of Silas Kane, 63, tall silver hair, combed immaculate eyes sharp under tailored suits. He moved through boardrooms, charity galas, golf courses, surrounded by allies in expensive coats. On paper, he was a model philanthropist, donations to hospitals, scholarships for underprivileged kids. But the photos told a colder story. Men in tactical gear slipping into warehouses at night, armored trucks loading unmarked crates, cash changing hands behind closed doors. Mariah set a small digital recorder on the desk and pressed play. The sound crackled, distorted, but the voice was unmistakable. Smooth, cultured, dripping with disdain. Boone is a problem. He saw more than he should have. Handle it. I don't care how. Just make sure it looks like an accident. A faint chuckle. Then silence. Clara's knees went weak. She gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white, as if the wood was the only thing keeping her upright. The room tilted. For years, she had clung to hope that maybe her suspicions were wrong, that maybe Eli's death was cruel fate, but the tape erased every doubt. It was Kane's voice, cold, casual, ordering her husband's murder as if discarding trash. Her breath hitched. In an instant, she was no longer in Mariah's office, but back in her kitchen, 3 winters ago, clutching the phone as a police officer's voice on the other end shattered her world. Accident, no survivors. I'm sorry, Mrs. Boone. She remembered collapsing against the counter, remembered Scout whining softly as he pressed against her legs, remembered staring at Eli's coat still hanging by the door, waiting for him to walk back in. Tears blurred her vision now, but she refused to let them fall. She forced her breath into a steady rhythm, the way she had on convoys under fire. She met Mariah's eyes, voice burning. This is proof. Mariah shook her head grimly. It's something. But Kane's lawyers will call it fabricated, call it hearsay. Unless we tie him directly to the money and the violence, it won't stand in court. Jack's voice rasped from his chair. That's why they came after me. I was getting close to linking the payments. Jack Holloway's body sagged in the chair, but his jaw stayed clenched. They buried me, he rasped. Clara Mae Boone turned her gaze to the window, snow smearing against the glass. Rage smoldered under her ribs. She had buried her grief for 3 years, but now it returned as fuel. Scout rose, suddenly padding toward the office door, his nose pressed to the crack beneath ears twitching. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Mariah Thorne frowned and moved quickly to the peephole, one hand brushing the Glock at her hip. Outside, 2 junior agents, Jed Polk and Rufus Lane, strolled past, their muffled laughter echoing down the hall. They glanced curiously at the door, startled by Scout's warning. Mariah exhaled softly. He doesn't miss a thing, does he? Clara stroked the shepherd's head, pride flickering through her grief. He sees more than most people. Always has. The agents whispered, then moved on. Scout relaxed slightly, but stayed seated, his gaze locked on the door, as if daring anyone to intrude. Mariah leaned back against her desk, crossing her arms. Your dog might be sharper than half my team. He's earned his place in this investigation. Jack managed a faint grin through exhaustion. Smarter than me some days, Clara finally let herself sink into a chair beside him. Her chest felt raw, scraped open by the recording, but beneath the ache, something else stirred purpose. For the first time since Eli Boone's death, she knew exactly where to direct her fury. Mariah snapped the folder shut. Kane thinks he's untouchable. He isn't. But this will take more than courage. It'll take strategy, patience, and allies who won't sell out. Her gaze swept between Clara and Jack. If you're in, there's no turning back. Clara met her eyes steadily, her voice like steel. I was in the moment he killed my husband. The office fell silent, broken only by the crackle of the building's ancient heating system. Scout lay across the doorway now, head on his paws, golden eyes watchful. He looked like a sentry guarding not just the office, but Clara's fragile heart. In the flickering fluorescent light, the shadows finally had a name. The enemy wasn't just a rumor, it had a voice, a face. And Clara Mae Boone no longer carried her grief alone. Outside, the storm over Billings had eased, leaving streets glazed with ice lamps, glowing faintly through the haze. In Mariah Thorne's office, the weight of the folder with Silas Kane's name lingered like a loaded weapon. Mariah leaned forward, elbows on the desk, eyes sharp, beneath the glow of the overhead light. We can't wait for him to make the next move. He has the power, the money, and the silence of half this state in his pocket. We need him to show his hand in public, and we need him cornered when he does. Clara sat opposite her parka, still damp from the snow, jaw tight, eyes steady. Then we set a trap. Jack shifted uncomfortably in the chair beside her. His body was still battered, face pale under the fluorescent light, but his voice carried the stubborn grit of a man who had been buried alive and survived. Easier said than done. Kane isn't reckless. He never shows up without layers of shields between him and the world. Mariah's gaze flicked to him. That's why you nearly died, because you got too close. He lives in shadows. We have to drag him into the open. Silence stretched. Then Clara spoke, voice low and deliberate. He wants me. He won't stop until I'm gone, just like Eli. If we make it look like I'm digging where I shouldn't put me in plain sight, he'll bite. Jack's head snapped toward her, eyes flashing. No, absolutely not. He already took one Boone, I won't let him take another. His voice cracked, ragged from emotion and exhaustion. Clara didn't flinch. I'm not asking for permission. I'm offering what he already wants, a target. The room grew taut with unspoken fears. Scout lifted his head from the floor, sensing the tension, golden eyes darting between them. Mariah broke the silence. It could work. If Kane believes you're about to expose him, he'll send his men. If we control the environment, we can catch them in the act. It won't be enough to put him in prison yet, but it will unravel his shield. Jack slumped back in his chair, rubbing his temples. His voice cracked when he spoke again. There's something else. He hesitated, then forced the words out. Lydia Rose. She's a doctor here in Billings. She doesn't know it, but she's on their radar. Kane's men have been following her for weeks, probably because of me. Jack Holloway's voice was a low rasp. I walked away from her years ago to keep her safe, and now I've dragged her into this anyway. Clara Mae Boone studied him quietly. She'd watched men unburden their souls on battlefields when mortality stripped away pride. This was no different. Jack's face was etched with regret, the confession almost harder than the wounds still marking his body. Mariah Thorne pulled a pen from her desk and scribbled Lydia Rose's name onto a notepad. Tell me everything about her. Jack nodded faintly. She's 38. Works long hours at St. Vincent's Hospital. Blonde hair tied back, blue scrubs, practical to the bone. She grew up here in Montana, stayed to serve her community. She deserves better than being dragged into this. Clara leaned forward. Then we make her part of the plan. If they're watching her, we use that. She becomes the signal that Silas Kane is watching us. Jack's fists clenched. I won't put her in danger. Mariah's tone was steady but firm. She's already in danger, Jack. The only difference is whether she knows it. Jack's shoulders sagged. He looked at Clara, then at Scout, who had padded closer and pressed his head against her knee. For a moment, Jack seemed to see them both clearly, soldier, widowed dog, bound together by loss and loyalty. His voice softened. He won't hesitate to kill again. Clara met his gaze. Her voice carried no tremor, only steel. Neither will I if it means stopping him. Mariah closed the folder with finality. Then it's decided. We'll set the stage. Clara becomes the bait. Lydia's presence confirms their surveillance. And when Kane's men make a move, we'll be waiting. The plan was reckless. It was dangerous. But in that office with shadows pressing at every window and memories clawing at every heart, it was the only path forward. Scout gave a soft growl, as though he too understood. Downtown Denver shimmered with winter lights. Limousines and black sedans lined the entrance of the Grand Sheridan Hotel. Its marble facade glowed gold beneath chandeliers suspended over the porte cochere, while valets in crisp uniforms rushed to open doors for guests in tuxedos and sequined gowns. Inside the ballroom buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of a string quartet. Waiters in black vests carried trays of champagne, weaving between tables adorned with crystal centerpieces. The event was billed as the Frontier Energy Winter Benefit Gala, money for children's hospitals, but beneath the glitter, it was pure networking. Powerful men reinforcing each other's wealth and influence. Clara Mae Boone adjusted the floor-length navy gown Mariah had chosen for her. The soldier's posture was impossible to disguise despite the dress. Her hair, usually tied back, had been curled and left down to soften her edges. She moved with poise, but her eyes never rested. Every reflective surface became a vantage point. Every cluster of men in suits a potential threat. At her side, Scout wore a black harness marked Service Dog, blending into the swirl of polished heels and leather shoes. His eyes scanned constantly tail, still the calm tension of a predator leashed. Jack Holloway accompanied them, transformed by a borrowed tuxedo. The bruises on his face were hidden beneath careful makeup, though the stiffness in his movements betrayed lingering pain. His role tonight was clear. Stay close guide Clara toward Kane, and keep his eyes open for Lydia. Rose expected to attend with the hospital delegation. Mariah Thorne was also present, disguised among the guests. She wore a midnight green gown, hair pinned in a sleek twist, but beneath the glamour, her Glock sat hidden in a thigh holster. She'd blended into political fundraisers before, but never one with stakes this personal. Her job was to coordinate surveillance from within and pass signals to the FBI team staged in vans around the block. Then came the man of the hour. Silas Kane, 63, entered the ballroom with Clara Whitmore on his arm, her diamonds flashing under the chandeliers. Kane's silver hair gleamed, his smile measured and practiced. He wore a tuxedo worth more than most guests' annual salaries as they clustered around him, eager hands outstretched. Clara's chest tightened at the sight. This was the man who had given the order. She'd heard his voice on tape, and yet here he stood, smiling, praised, untouchable. Scout leaned gently against her leg, grounding her in the storm rising inside. Jack whispered, "This is it. We stay close, record everything, and pray he slips." Clara and Jack melted into the crowd. A waiter brushed past, and Clara Mae Boone discreetly pressed a small recording device beneath the lip of a marble column near the stage. Mariah Thorne handed a similar bug to a sympathetic staffer, one of her junior agents in disguise, who slipped it under the head table. Moments later, Silas Kane took the stage, tapping the microphone. His speech rolled out as expected. Heartfelt thanks to donors, polished statistics on children's health, rehearsed humility. Cameras flashed applause, swelled, but it was afterward, when he leaned close to Amos Thatcher in private, that his mask cracked. His voice, low and laced with arrogance, drifted just far enough. Obstacles come and go. Eli Boone was one of them. Too curious, too righteous. He learned the hard way that accidents happen when you cross me. Clara's chest tightened, her pulse slamming. The recorder blinked faintly, capturing every word. Jack Holloway squeezed her arm. "We've got it." But before relief could sink in, danger struck. Scout stiffened, ears pricked, body coiled. In the mirror of a gilded pillar, Clara caught sight of a man above on the balcony. He wore a waiter's vest, but his hand moved too fast, too deliberate, drawing a suppressed pistol from under a tray. The muzzle swung toward her. Time fractured. Scout lunged, shoving Clara aside just as the shot cracked. Glass exploded behind her, champagne raining down. Chaos tore through the gala. Guests shrieked, diving under tables. The string quartet scattered violins, clattering to the marble. Kane's smile faltered. His security hustled him toward the exit. Clara hit the ground hard, rolling behind an overturned table, her gown ripping at the seam. Jack dropped beside her, face twisted in pain, dragging a compact pistol from his jacket. Scout snarled, gaze locked on the balcony. The shooter aimed again, but the shepherd was faster. With a blur of muscle and fury, Scout bounded across the floor, launching up the staircase. He clamped his jaws on the gunman's arm, wrenching the weapon free. Gasps echoed as the pistol clattered onto the carpet. Mariah Thorne was already sprinting, heels abandoned, moving with a predator's focus. She slammed the gunman against the wall, cuffs clicking around his wrists in a blur. "FBI," her voice rang out, snapping the crowd to silence. Flash bulbs popped wildly, cameras capturing the shepherd's bared teeth, the toppled tables, the chaos. Clara staggered upright, heart pounding. She had nearly been executed in front of 1,000 witnesses. Instead, they now had proof Kane's arrogance and a failed hit in plain sight. Jack steadied her, his grip tight on her elbow. He just exposed himself, and the world saw it. Clara dropped to Scout's side, stroking his fur as he pinned the would-be assassin with a steady growl. "Good boy," she whispered. The trap had sprung. Kane had been forced into daylight, and there was no turning back. By morning, headlines blazed across the country, photos of chaos, shattered glass, and a German shepherd mid-leap. Kane's name wasn't on the front page yet, but whispers in political circles spread like wildfire. He'd been recorded. He'd been seen. His empire was cracking. But Kane wasn't waiting to be cornered. Before the FBI warrant was even printed, he vanished. His jet was grounded in Colorado by federal order, but his convoy of black SUVs tore north along frozen highways bound for his fortified estate in the Bighorn Mountains near the Montana-Wyoming line. The storm hunted him. By dusk, snow whipped sideways winds, screaming through the passes, burying roads by the minute. In the lead bureau vehicle, Mariah Thorne commanded through sheer grit. Exhaustion hollowed her eyes, but her voice carried steel. She wore a tactical jacket over her evening gown, the sequins hidden beneath body armor. Into her radio, she snapped, "Teams Bravo and Delta hold the southern flank. We're pushing up Route 212. Kane doesn't slip past us." In the back, Clara Mae Boone cradled a rifle across her knees. Her parka was zipped, high wool cap pulled low, but her eyes blazed with raw determination. Scout crouched at her boots, muscles taut, ready for the fight to come. Jack Holloway rode in the next vehicle, flanked by 2 bureau agents. His tuxedo from the gala was gone, replaced by a government-issue parka, though the bruises shadowing his face made him look every bit as battered as he felt. Despite Mariah Thorne's protests, he had insisted on coming. He killed Eli Boone. He tried to kill me. I'm not sitting this one out. The convoy snaked higher into the mountains, tires fighting through drifts, while snow hammered the windshields. Ahead, Silas Kane's SUVs strained up the pass engines, echoing like beasts in the storm. The first shots cracked through the blizzard, sparking against steel, carving into snowbanks. Kane's men were dug into the ridges, hidden in white parkas' rifles, spitting fire down onto the road. "Out, move, move!" Mariah barked into the gale. Clara Mae Boone hit the snow, running boots crunching, pulling Scout tight to her side. She unclipped his harness and whispered into his ear, "Find them, boy." The shepherd vanished into the white. Jack stumbled from his vehicle, pistol raised, taking cover behind a boulder. He returned fire at the muzzle flashes. Beside him, a young agent, Hank Mercer, fired with jaw-clenched freckles, visible beneath his helmet. He'd grown up working ranches near Bozeman before the Bureau. Now he was holding the line against Kane's killers. Clara sprinted across the road, snow slicing her cheeks, rifle bucking against her shoulder. She dropped one guard with a clean shot, then dove into cover. Scout lunged from the storm, slamming another gunman into the drifts, his teeth flashing. A cry cut through the chaos. Clara spun and saw Jack stagger, his parka ripped crimson at the shoulder before he crumpled into the snow. His pistol slipped from his grip. Hank grabbed him, dragging him behind cover as bullets shredded the ground around them. Clara dove beside Jack, her gloves already ripping open a kit. Blood poured fast and hot. His eyes locked onto hers, breath ragged. "Don't stop. Go after him," he rasped. "Not without you," she snapped, pressing gauze to the wound hands, steady despite the storm. "You're not dying here," Scout returned, muzzle-bloody growl vibrating through the snow. Clara tightened the bandage until Jack hissed. "You'll live," she muttered. "I've patched worse." But Kane's convoy was already climbing toward the estate gates, his guards fighting harder to buy him time. Mariah slid into cover beside them, snow whipping her face. "We push, now he's minutes from the estate." Clara looked at Jack, pale but conscious, then back at Mariah. Her voice was steel. "Then we finish this." She pointed Scout toward another gunman. "Go!" The shepherd bolted, crashing into his target. Clara followed, rifle spitting fire. Within minutes, the ridge fell silent. Kane's guards scattered in the snow, but his SUVs had vanished into the storm swallowed by the mountain. Clara knelt beside Jack again, her gloves slick with blood, snow dusting her shoulders. His breath rattled his hand, clutching hers weakly. "Don't let it end like this," he whispered. "It won't," she promised, her voice iron. "Not for you. Not for Eli." Behind them, Mariah's radio crackled as agents regrouped for the final push. The storm screamed, the mountain loomed, and Kane's shadow stretched ahead into the white. But Clara, with Scout at her side, and Jack alive beneath her hands, refused to let him slip away. The Bighorn Mountains showed no mercy that night. Wind tore through the pine snow, driving sideways, until the world itself blurred into chaos. Beyond the blizzard, Kane's estate emerged a fortress of stone and iron, looming against the wilderness like a challenge. FBI vehicles skidded into the courtyard headlights, cutting through the storm. Agents spilled out rifles, raised, advancing on the massive double doors. Clara Mae Boone was with them, her parka-frosted white rifle, steady eyes blazing with purpose. At her heel, Scout crept forward, ears pinned, growl rolling low. Behind her, Jack Holloway leaned heavily on Hank Mercer, blood still seeping through the bandage, but his gaze burning with stubborn fire. And at the front strode Mariah Thorne, hair whipped loose by the storm, her voice sharp over the comms. "Teams, lock down every flank. No one gets out. Kane's cornered tonight." Boots thundered across polished marble shouts, cutting through the storm as agents flooded the mansion. Inside, the world shifted from blizzard to blinding opulence. Crystal chandeliers glittered above Persian rugs, muted the chaos underfoot, and walls lined with gold-framed portraits of Silas Kane loomed like sentinels to his empire. The air reeked of cigars and wealth, a kingdom built on blood. At the far end of the great hall, Kane stood waiting. His tuxedo from the gala was wrinkled, his bow tie loose silver hair gleaming in the lamplight. His face, twisted between arrogance and fury, betrayed the cracks beneath his control. Around him, his last private guards raised their weapons, but their resolve faltered under the advancing line of FBI rifles. "Silas Kane, FBI, drop your weapon and surrender." Mariah Thorne's voice cut like steel through the hall. Kane's gaze snapped to Clara Mae Boone, recognition flaring. His sneer carried across the room. "You, the soldier's widow. You should have stayed buried in grief. Your husband never understood how the world really works, and neither do you." Clara leveled her rifle, her voice steady and cold. "Eli Boone understood justice. That's why you murdered him." The words shattered his composure. Rage twisted his face, his polished mask gone. He raised his arms and bellowed, his voice echoing against chandeliers and marble. "Yes, I ordered it." Boone stuck his nose where it didn't belong. "He had to be dealt with just like Holloway, just like anyone fool enough to cross me." The room froze. Every word had been caught by bureau recorders streaming live to the media feed Mariah's team had activated. Outside these walls, prosecutors, journalists, and the public were hearing Kane damn himself in real time. Realization struck too late. His eyes went wild, locking back on Clara. With a roar, he reached for the pistol, hidden in his tuxedo. "Clara." Jack Holloway's hoarse cry rang out, but Scout was faster. The shepherd launched across the marble, a blur of fur and muscle jaws clamping down on Kane's wrist just as the pistol cleared his jacket. The gun clattered harmlessly across the floor. Kane screamed as Scout dragged him off balance, teeth sunk deep. Clara surged forward, kicking the weapon farther away. She slammed Kane down, knee pinning his chest rifle, pressing hard against his collarbone. The storm howled against the windows, but inside only Kane's ragged breaths and Scout's guttural growl filled the silence. Mariah advanced, cuffs ready, her voice ringing with finality. "Silas Kane, you are under arrest for conspiracy, murder, racketeering, and obstruction of justice." The Empire ended not with applause, but with the snap of steel around his wrists. Weeks later, the headlines told a new story. Silas Kane sentenced to life without parole. His empire dismantled his assets, seized his allies, fleeing like rats. The man who had once thought himself untouchable now rotted behind bars. Jack Holloway spent those weeks healing at St. Vincent's. His shoulder mended slow, but the fire in his eyes burned bright again. Clara visited daily, sometimes with words, sometimes in silence, always with Scout at his feet. Together, they spoke of Eli Boone, weaving memory into strength instead of grief. And then came Lydia Rose. The doctor carried the quiet strength of someone who healed others even when fear stalked her steps. 38 blonde hair pulled back in a knot, scrubs wrinkled from long shifts. She walked into Jack's room with the steady grace of someone who had already chosen courage. Jack's voice cracked when he whispered Lydia. "I never stopped." She silenced him with a touch to his shoulder. "I know." Clara watched from the doorway. Scout pressed against her leg. For the first time in years, she felt peace stirring through the scar. Spring melted the snows when they gathered at Hauser Lake. A crowd stood with Clara, Jack, Lydia, Mariah, and neighbors from across Montana as they dedicated the Eli Boone Justice Fund. Its mission to protect whistleblowers, to shield families who dared to speak truth, to honor those silenced by power. Clara's voice carried steady across the crowd. "My husband believed truth mattered even when it cost everything. Today, we don't honor him with grief, but with action. This is for Eli, and for everyone who refuses to bow to fear." Applause swelled. Jack stood with Lydia at his side, arm still in a sling, but spirit unbroken. Mariah clapped from the front row, her sharp eyes glinting with pride. Scout sat at attention, chest broad, the living emblem of loyalty and courage. In that moment, Clara no longer felt defined by widowhood. She was part of something larger, a family forged from loss, stitched together by justice, bound by love, and anchored by the unyielding loyalty of a dog who had never once left her side. The storm had passed. The scar remained, but it no longer meant pain. It meant survival. But in the end, light found its way through. Miracles don't always arrive with thunder and fire. They come in the quiet resilience of a soul that refuses to break, in the loyalty of a dog who would die before giving up, and in the steady strength of people who choose justice over fear. Clara Mae Boone's journey is a reminder that even in the fiercest storms, God can turn pain into purpose and loss into healing. We may not battle billionaires or chase justice through blizzards, but every day we face choices whether to stay silent or speak truth, to give up, or to trust that God is still writing the greater ending. If He carried Clara Jack Holloway and Scout through their trial, He can carry us through ours too. If this story stirred something in your heart, please share it, so others may also find hope. Leave a comment with your thoughts, subscribe for more stories of faith and courage, and join us in prayer for all those still waiting on their miracle. And if you believe God still works wonders today, write Amen in the comments below. May the Lord bless and keep every single one of you watching.